A very good morning to you, Namawetu.
Thank you very much, Elvis, and welcome back to the University of the Western Cape, where the 4th National Congress, as you've said, of the YCLSA is currently underway. Earlier on, I spoke about delays that were experienced yesterday in terms of registration, this morning as well. The conference was supposed to start at about 9 this morning, but delegates only started walking inside the hall at about 10:30. Now, this is a very important conference, Elvis, where they'll be deliberating on issues such as unemployment, such as economic participation, land, and so on and so forth. But earlier, before we got cut, I was talking to Mr. Yershin Pillay, who is the national chairperson of the YCLSA. He talks to me more about the conference. Thank you so much for staying with us. Mr. Pillay, just going into the conference, you said we are ready.
Indeed, and we are already starting to get into some of the more substantive issues. Delegates at Congress will be discussing how best do we inform policy and legislation as young people, how best do we ensure the radical socio-economic transformation that we seek to achieve in the next few years, how best do we inform policy and legislation on education and skills development, on health, and on various other issues affecting young people today. But at the core is the issue of accelerated job creation for young people. Most importantly for almost all young people today is the issue of jobs, and we hope to inform both policy, legislation and the practical strategic interventions required for accelerated job creation.
Now, Mr. Pillay, in 2006 there were some youth demands that were adopted in that conference. You've touched on some of them now, but how far are we in achieving those demands that were adopted in 2006?
We've made significant progress. We've made a lot of progress, in fact, that we can actually boast about. But what we need to acknowledge is that there's still a lot more to be done. There are challenges which we need to reflect on, to say that perhaps we should have done more in areas of education and skills, for example, on the quality side. Perhaps we should have done more on issues of health and well-being, on the empowerment of young women, youth with disabilities, who, for example, 29.8% of young people with disabilities still have no access to formal education. And we should have done more in terms of the transformation of our economy. So yes, indeed, we agree with the efforts at the reindustrialization of our economy. But what we as the YCL have been saying is perhaps we also need to focus on transforming the ownership and control patterns of our economy. And young people should be at the forefront of such transformation.
Now, Mr. Pillay, it's all good and well that about 1,000 youths have gathered here in Cape Town to engage in those issues. But how do we make sure that we take them back to the ground and the youth of South Africa is developed better?
The advantage of a Congress of this nature is that it is composed of delegates from branches who come from various communities, especially rural communities across the country. After these discussions, they will take the resolutions of this Congress back to their constituencies, dialogue with the various communities, seek to ensure that young people, especially in their communities, take ownership of whatever we have resolved here. So, for example, we hope to achieve a review of the National Youth Policy to make it simple and more focused, and so that young people can take ownership of their own National Youth Policy and explain what is it that is contained in this new and improved National Youth Policy. So we're hoping that the delegates from this Congress will be able to communicate that to their various constituencies after this Congress.
Now again, Mr. Pillay, there will always be criticisms. There have always been criticisms around YCL and that it's just another organization where people just make sure that they further their careers in politics. It's got nothing to do about development of the youth. Just what's your comment on that?
Well, those criticisms will always be there. I think the most important part is to assess our own performance and our own progress, to look at how far have we gone in being an activist campaigning Young Communist League. And if you look at some of our resolutions of the past, it was the YCL that initiated a campaign for the provision of free sanitary towels for young women in rural areas, which became government policy. It was the YCL who asked questions about the publication of matric results, which is a private matter matter, and for some reason has become a public issue, which led to the review of how matric results are published today. It was the YCL that really focused on cooperatives development, that young people should take more of an interest in cooperatives as a form, not of a form of alternative enterprise, but of making it part of the mainstream. And today we have organizations in the country that support funding for co-ops development. So these are just but a few practical examples of how the discussions in the YCL have actually bared fruit in the last few years.
Now, Mr. Pillay, you are a man that wears many hats when it comes to youth development issues, the NYDA, that was criticized quite a lot in the last couple of years. And now people are saying that he's failed in the NYDA. Why is he in another youth organization? Just where is the NYDA standing at this point in time? And with those turnaround strategies, do we see the youth advantaging from those?
I think we can safely say the NYDA today is a more credible and capable development agency than ever before. In fact, the Auditor General's opinion was that we have made significant progress in good governance and ethical leadership by reducing our irregular expenditure by more than 73%, 86% performance, reaching for the first time more than 1 million young people in the provision of information, career guidance services, etc. The challenge is, of course, and it will always be there, irrespective of who leads the NYDA. When you have 21 million young people in the country, 7.5 million approximately, who are out of school and out of work, no amount of resources or leadership can be able to address that kind of demand in a very short space of time. So our aim has always been to say, judge us by our performance and by the targets we set, and that should be a fair assessment of how far the NYDA has gone in the last few years.
Thank you very much for your time. Well, that was Mr. Yershin Pillay, who is the national chairperson of the YCLSA at the 4th National Congress that is currently underway here at the UWC. A bit later on, we will be listening to Mr. Blade Nzimande, who is the Secretary General of the SACP, and he'll be addressing the delegates down here at this conference. But for now, it's back to you in the studio.